We will open up to questions thereafter. Please use your chat boxes to ask questions, and we will get to your questions, hopefully to most of your questions, at the end of the seminar that Yossi will give us. So over to you, Yossi. Thank you so much for joining us. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you everybody for joining. I see the names, so some of them I am familiar with, so it's good evening to all those that I know, but many are not, so good evening to you as well. And I'll speak for about, I don't know, 20 to 30 minutes. I was speaking about 20, but Paul said, well, go ahead, you can have 30. So I'll speak for 20 to 30 minutes. And the reason I'm speaking with you is not just because there is this issue of extending or applying Israeli sovereignty to parts of Judea and Samaria, as it was stated in the context of the American peace plan, but also because your Prime Minister, Mr. Boris Johnson, wrote an open letter to us Israelis on the pages of Yediot Achronot, and in which he was trying to convince us not to go there. And he, amongst other things that he did, referred to the territories that are at stake here as Palestinian territories and called what we are supposed to do annexation. And I felt that, unfortunately, your Prime Minister has a mistaken attitude to what's happening, and I wrote an open letter addressed to him, which was on Fathom, and it was a very long letter, so since I cannot really explain everything that was in the letter, I recommend going there and reading the letter. It will have much of what I'm saying, what I'm going to say here. And let's start with what's at stake. This is not annexation. This is applying the Israeli law to parts of Judea and Samaria. Why is it not annexation? Because you can annex an area that did not belong to you. But fortunately, these areas, these territories that are disputed between us and the Palestinians, we have a very solid claim for them. And actually, the last people on earth who can question our claim are the British, and especially the British government, because the mandate that was given to them back in 1922 was very clear about it. The mandate said in its opening remarks that recognition has thereby been given to the historical connection of the Jewish people with Palestine and to the grounds for reconstituting their national home in the country. Now, I can tell you that when this was phrased back in 1920 in San Remo and later on in 1922 in Lucerne, there was a big opposition to that language by the Arabs. And there was a big debate about this one word, which said reconstituting. And the fact is that the international body, the League of Nations that gave this mandate to Britain, recognized the historical connections and said this is about reconstituting the national home of the Jews in this piece of land. So this was the basis upon which the British mandatory was given the responsibility for this terrain, and this was the purpose of the mandate, to reconstitute this Jewish homeland in Palestine. But some people say, okay, that's nice, that's good, but you have to divide the land. We are not against dividing the land, by the way. We do all that we do in the context of and never-ending negotiations with the Palestinians about how to divide the land. We were ready to divide the land back in 36 and 37 with the Peel Commission. We were ready to divide the land back in 47 with the partition plan. We were ready to divide the land in all the peace talks that prevailed between us and the Palestinians again and again and again. But it was the Palestinians who were never ready to accept any division of the land. But back then, when this idea of a mandate and reconstituting a national homeland for the Jewish people in their ancestral homeland, which was called then Palestine and later on the land of Israel, when this was the issue, by the way, in Article 5 of the mandate, it's very clear that there are limitations of what the British can do. The mandatory shall be responsible that no Palestine territory shall be ceded or leased to or in any way placed under the control of any foreign power. That's Article 5 of the mandate. So when Prime Minister Johnson calls this land a Palestinian land, this is in total contradiction to the mandate his government or his predecessor's government received from the League of Nations. And by the way, this attitude of the League of Nations was never changed. There is no binding legal document that oversees the statements of the mandate, because this again was a product of a big and long discussion. But in 1945 in San Francisco, when the Charter of the United Nations was formed, Article 80 expressed that this very important message that nothing in this charter oversees what was said by the League of Nations. And since there was no agreement ever since then about the fate of these territories other than the mandate and the language of the mandate given by the League of Nations, by the 51 members of the League of Nations without any exception. So this idea that you treat these territories as Palestinian lands is very strange, definitely coming from a British Prime Minister. So I had to explain that to Mr. Johnson, and I think that he has to take this into account. This is a land that we have a title for. We can, if we like, to share it with anybody we want, and we want to share it with the Palestinians. We don't ignore the fact that there is a Palestinian people, and we are ready to share it with them. But there are parts of this territory that we cannot share, that are essential for our security. And the logic of what we are doing now is to apply our sovereignty over those territories that are necessary for our security and are necessary for our ability to live together with the Palestinians. And this is the interesting point in the Trump peace plan, that for the first time, there's a realistic plan that says, listen, guys, we tried every way to convince you to make a deal, to make it compromise, you and the Palestinians. The Palestinians refused every proposal we gave. The international community gave them all kinds of proposals, they always refused. So we understand that there's no way to move forward unless some of the issues will be decided unilaterally. And there's no way, no chance in the world that the Palestinians will accept Israeli sovereignty in the Jordan Valley. So, and at the same time, we all understand it's not, you don't have to be a general in the Israeli Defense Forces to understand the necessity of for Israel's security of having sovereignty over the Jordan Valley, for example. This is clear. Anybody of you, I guess many of you have been to Israel, you know the terrain, you know that any other idea of defensible borders for Israel that ignores the fact that Israel has to control the Jordan Valley is a recipe for a continuation of the war in a very difficult conditions. And we saw what happened even in an area which has much less strategic value than the West Bank, which is the Gaza Strip. Even the Gaza Strip, when we left it, it became a very dangerous place for us. And even though you can say that, okay, from a pure military consideration, you can, if you like, enter Gaza and take it over again. Nobody is going to do that. Nobody is interested in doing that. And there's no point in trying to take over the entire Gaza again. So what's going to happen in Nablus and in Kalkilia and in Tulkarem and in Ramallah and in Jenin, once we leave and they have the ability to replenish themselves with weapons from the outside? It's the same like Gaza, but on steroids. That's everybody who thinks that we can give up the Jordan Valley doesn't care about us, and doesn't care if we get lost. So we cannot afford that. And the Palestinians cannot afford it either. They are never going to say, okay, we give up. Why? Because the core idea of the Palestinians, the core narrative, is that Jews don't have the right to have a state here. The Zionism should be fought against until its demise. And even though, according to their paper prepared in 1974 that's called the stages theory, even though they're ready to take whatever Israel is going to offer them and form their national entity, meaning a state, and any such piece of land, the purpose of having this piece of land is to reach eventually the final goal, which is based on the support of the Arabs and the Muslim states. They will use this piece of land that will be given to them, just like they did in Gaza, in order to fight until Zionism is defeated. So that's why they need the Jordan Valley. Without the Jordan Valley, it's going to be very difficult to implement this idea of and this narrative. So that's why they cannot give it up, and we cannot give it up. So there's no point in trying to reach an agreement with the Palestinians on the Jordan Valley. It will never happen. And so if we want peace, this is the logic of this peace plan, and something new. So it's a new paradigm. There are certain things on which we have to allow Israel to take unilateral steps because we shall never reach an agreement. The logic that stands behind it is even beyond that. It says that why we weren't able ever to move forward on the peace process. And the Palestinians were offered all kinds of amazing things, and Israel was ready to discuss it. We never accepted it, but it was ready to discuss this unbelievable offers given to the Palestinians in Camp David and later on by President Obama and his Secretary of State Kerry, that were ready to give Palestinians everything. And still they would not accept it. Why? Because they were asked to accept Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people. So this peace plan says, listen, guys, Palestinians, everything until now was based on the idea that until the two parties agree upon something, nothing happens. This, since you are always refusing everything, gave you veto power over any progress towards peace. What we now offer is a new paradigm, that we can move towards peace even if you refuse to move towards peace. And some of the things we can do in order to move towards peace, we shall do unilaterally. And if you insist on not allowing any movement towards peace, there's going to be a price to you. Whereas in the past, whenever you refused, you were given a better offer that was never enough for you. So you were waiting for an even better one. For here, for the first time, we are going to give you an offer. And if you refuse, you are going to lose. If, you can enter negotiations about the plan right now, and there is not going to be any unilateral step. We should give you some time to discuss it. You can not enter the negotiations right now. There is going to be a unilateral step, but then thereafter, you will have 4 years to discuss this matter. If not, if you're not going to use these 4 years, there are going to be more prices to pay. That's the new approach, and this deprives the Palestinians from their veto power, and also reflects a very interesting element in the plan that we are ready to accept, that the major problem with the peace process until now was that there was no courage on any of the parts, not even on the Israeli, by the way, to say that the real problem is the Palestinian narrative itself. We want the Palestinians, we, the Americans, we want the Palestinians to understand that if they are not going to change their narrative, if they're not going to accept that there is a Jewish people, if they're not going to accept that the Jews did have an historical sovereignty in Israel, in the land of Israel, if they are not going to continue, if they are going to continue to say that Israel is a colonialist project and that the Jews are terrible creatures and there's no justification for the pure Palestinians living next to the horrible Jews, if they are not going to accept that they are not such victims of the conflict, but everybody is a victim of the conflict, and the conflict should be solved in a way that doesn't make everybody totally satisfied. Everybody has to make some concessions. If all these things are not going to happen, there's not going to be peace. So you have to change your narrative. That's another very major change in this paradigm of the peace plan. And that Israel's security is a major issue that has to be respected. And we cannot come up with all kinds of fantastic ideas of devices that will take care of Israel's security, or international forces that will take care of Israel's security. This is not going to work. Everybody knows that. So it's got to be a plan in which Israel's security is guaranteed by Israel itself. All of that is in this plan. And if the Palestinians accept these ideas, then there is a chance for peace. If not, we shall go back to the status quo. That's not very promising, but what can we do? If we cannot move forward, we shall go back to the status quo, but it's going to be a different status quo. A status quo in which parts of the plan are going to be implemented unilaterally. Now, this plan has a lot of opposition, of course. And I'll say that there are three sources of opposition to this plan. And all of them are in one way or another represented in Prime Minister Johnson's open letter. The first opposition to the plan is that these are Palestinian territories. What do? You don't have the authority to do anything about these territories. These are Palestinian territories. As I said, this is nonsense. These territories were never Palestinian. There was never a Palestinian state. There is a Palestinian people living on part of this plan, of these areas, not so much in the Jordan Valley, which is a void area, but in certain other areas, there are Palestinians, and we respect that, and we are ready to share it with them, as I said. But this is definitely not a Palestinian land. The Palestinians have demands regarding some of these lands. But this is one source of opposition that's mainly coming from Arab states and radicals around the world. These are Palestinian land that UN, upon the majority of the supporters of the Palestinians in it, has adopted this language that says these are occupied Palestinian lands. At worst, they are occupied lands. And I want to emphasize here, even regarding them as occupied land, is based on the concept that life started in 67. Because between 49 and 67, these lands were under Jordanian control, and we took them in a defensive war in 67. And because, according to the international law, you cannot take control of territory by force, then we shouldn't take it. I'm putting aside that it's this strange and totally ununderstandable idea that even if you are the aggressor, you will never lose land because you cannot lose land to the other side who's defending itself. But okay, but anyhow, this was not a Palestinian land, and life didn't start in 67. Life started back in the Bible time, and we had a kingdom here, and later on we were always longing to come back here, and we had some presence in there, and that's life. And we came back 130 years ago, and ever since then we are living here. So this is life, and this is reality. So this is one opposition that has to be dealt with. The second opposition that many people raise, and I'm not criticizing it, is that why do that? It's going to be a reason for a lot of. It was going to be a reason for a lot of criticism around the world. Maybe some retaliatory moves. Maybe some violence. Everything is nice now. Everything is fine. Why shake the boat? That's true. In a way, that's true. That right now the situation seems to be a little bit calm. Although, as I speak, I see pictures of the interception of a rocket over Sderot. But let's say relative calm. The Israeli relative calm. Rockets over the road is part of the relative calm. So why shake the boat? And the reason is very simple. The status quo is a recipe for pressure over Israel. We see that all the time. And we have now a golden opportunity where we have a peace plan that understands the reality on the ground, and we have international support, or at least American support, for such a move. So we couldn't make it beforehand without the context of a peace plan, and we couldn't make it without American support. But if we have these two elements, then it's an opportunity for Israel, maybe a unique opportunity, because nobody knows what's going to happen in November, and most people would believe that we shall not have this opportunity anymore after November. So we should seize the opportunity as long as it's presented to us. And this will hopefully bring some positive reactions. And the third element, and we are ready to see the reaction. Yes, it's going to be some sort of negative reaction to it by the Palestinians and by others, Jordanians and others, but we don't think that the reaction is going to be that dramatic. And I don't want to say that this is also because of the COVID-19, but that is its contribution. And the Iranians under a lot of pressure right now. So from every point you look at it, and in the end of the day, the moderate Arabs, the pragmatic Arabs are not going to go out of the way because they need us more than we need them. So we shall be able to live through the reaction. But it's true, there's going to be a reaction, and nobody wants to experience it. That said, unfortunately, nobody can have a free lunch. So we have to understand that. And the third part of the opposition to the Israeli move, or potential move, comes from a different point, which is very well presented in Johnson's letter, which is that, listen, we have a paradigm. We don't want to change the paradigm. Our paradigm is that we love the Palestinians, and we want them to have a veto power, and we want you to continue to try again and again make peace in an impossible way that also has already been proven impossible. And, but we still want to go through this again and again and again and again and again, and fail and fail and fail and fail and fail the same way we failed in the past, because this is the paradigm we believe in. We believe in the two-state solution, not the two states for two people solution. We believe in the two-state solution. So people don't understand how this old paradigm is being used by the Palestinians. They speak of the two-state solution. One state is the Palestinian, and the other is the state of Israel, called Israel, but it's the state of all of its citizens, not a Jewish state. And we are speaking about two states for two peoples. One of them is the Palestinian state, and the other is the nation state of the Jewish people, which has a democratic regime and respects the rights of all its citizens, but it's a Jewish state, or the nation state of the Jewish people. That's what we are talking about. Those who are committed to the old paradigm ignore it. And that's why they fail again and again, because if they are going to ask the Palestinians to accept Israel as nation state of the Jewish people, they will never get that. And that's why the Palestinians insist on the right of return for the refugees and things like that. And but if they say, let's have two-state solution, but not two states for two peoples, Israelis will not accept it. So this idea that the old paradigm can produce some sort of a solution is a mirage. It's never going to happen. And that is why this new plan is something different. But for all of the people who are in the peace industry for so many years, admitting that their paradigm was wrong right from the beginning is admitting that their entire life was misused, was spent for nothing. And they cannot afford it. And the Europeans are first among these people who are totally committed to this idea, but also many people in the Democratic Party in the United States, many people in Israel, in the Israeli left, are totally committed to that. For them to admit that the paradigm was wrong is something that is beyond their capability. It's like saying we just wasted our life. And that's something very, very difficult for people to accept, that we have to adopt a new paradigm, a paradigm that's based on taking care of Israel's security and realizing that you cannot reach an agreement with the Palestinians on that, so you have to do some steps unilaterally, like applying Israeli sovereignty and law over Jordan Valley and over the settlements. And that's something that is going to open new opportunities for real peace, a peace that is durable, a peace that is based on 2 states for 2 peoples. Otherwise, we are going to stay with the current status quo, with all its difficulties and with all its benefits. It's also something that is beneficial because some problems maybe cannot be solved, and the best way to handle them is just to maintain a certain status quo about them. And it might be that this problem is one of them. I'm not ruling that out, but at least let's try to solve it based on a new paradigm. If we fail also in that one, maybe we'll be left only with the status quo. I'll stop here. Maybe one more word about where we stand now. So there was an agreement when the coalition government in Israel, the unity government in Israel was formed, that Netanyahu will be able to move forward with this idea of the unilateral steps in the context of the peace plan after July 1st. And this was based, there were 2 preconditions for that. First, that the mapping committee that demarcates the lines exactly where the unilateral steps will be taken will finish its activities. And the other was that the prime minister will say that he does it in the context of the peace plan, and the Americans will give full support to it. What happened was that after Pompeo paid a visit to Israel, I think it was May 24th, and he met Benny Gantz and Gabi Ashkenazi, the Minister of Defense and the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And after King Abdallah said this move is going to cause meaningful, significant clash between Israel and Jordan. And after the Americans themselves found themselves in a totally different situation than the one in which they declared that they are in favor of it, after the results of what's happening in everywhere, but almost also in the United States because of the COVID-19 and other things, the Americans got some sort of cold feet. And now they added all kinds of conditions to moving forward, like okay, the conditions we already mentioned, but why won't you also do some gestures for the Palestinians? Give them some land, do this, do that, in order to keep the Palestinians happy as well. And we want to discuss this matter with the Palestinians, and we want to discuss it with the Jordanians once more. And by that, time was lost, and now it's almost already more than a month that was lost on that. And time is of the essence here, because we have to finish it before the elections, or a long time before the elections. So very little time is left. And though it has not yet been put off the table, it has moved from the center of the table to very close to the margin of the table, and it's just about to fall out of it. That's where we stand. And Israel itself is so consumed with the fight against the corona that the public here doesn't have time for these problems that will always be there. So you don't have to solve them tomorrow morning. That's the feeling. And I think that that's where we stand right now. But a decision has not been taken yet. And inside the American administration and inside the Israeli government, the discussion about these options are still going on. Sorry. Yes, please.
Yossi, thank you very much. It's very, it's brief, succinct, and you've given a strong reasoning for annexation and sovereignty. What I'd like to do now is press you on all those Israelis, leave those people that live overseas and the international pressure that's coming on Israel. But why are there many in Israel a large minority, it is a minority nonetheless, but a large minority of Israelis who are anti-sovereignty and against this move. Could you tell us why that is? If they're living in the same place, they are living in the same issues. Tell us why.
Well, they are living in the same place, but well, much of it is ignorance. Much of it is ignorance. Many Israelis have their own idea about what is the Palestinian narrative. They insist on ignoring what the Palestinians are saying and tell the Palestinians what they have to say and believe that they are saying what they tell them that they have to say. The Palestinians never say it, but most of them don't have any clue about Arabic, so they don't know what the Palestinians are saying. And they believe that what they want to hear from the Palestinians, this is what the Palestinians are saying. And because of that, they believe that there is a chance, according to the old paradigm, to reach an agreement. The fact that they failed so many times. I mean, these are the same people who stood behind Oslo. These are the same people who stood behind the disengagement from Gaza. These are the people who again and again make the same mistake. And some of them, as I said, it's ignorance. Some of them is willful blindness. They know what the Palestinians think, but they don't want to hear it. And this is even worse than ignorance. I don't know what's worse, but both of them are very difficult situations. And these people are also motivated by the same problem that I said before, that this is their entire life. Listen, take somebody like some of the people who stood behind Oslo, okay, and behind the disengagement, and behind all kinds of dreams of an agreement with the Palestinians. For them to say, okay, this cannot be happening, we have to do something else. It's like saying, I spent all my life in vain. I was living in a mistake forever. It's very difficult. You know, some of them said, if the Oslo agreement is going to fail, we should have to take unilateral steps and take back the lands and so on and so forth. When the moment came, they were not ready to do that. We have many people including in the retired military officers and others that are in deep willful blindness situation. And once you are living in such a situation, you're living in an imaginary world, and it's very difficult for anybody to interfere and say, listen, this is imaginary. This is imaginary. You wake up. You don't want to wake up. It's a very difficult situation. On top of them, there are some people who really say the same that I said before about the price. Said, why should we pay this price? Aren't we in control of the Jordan Valley anyhow? Does anybody threaten our control of the Jordan Valley? That is in a way true. But that's one thing to be in de facto control of the Jordan Valley, and another of being de jure control of the Jordan Valley. Because if you want the Palestinians to start moving towards peace, and we want peace, we believe that this is the best way to get peace. If you want to get peace, you have to say, listen, something is happening here. You are not going to be in control of the Jordan Valley ever. And because of that, you have to change your narrative, because your entire narrative is based on the fact that you can use the Jordan Valley in order to bring arms and people and threaten Israel once you have a Palestinian state. So you have to understand this is not going to happen. And yes, we are not arguing about the fact that it's going to be costly. There is going to be a price for that. But the discussion here is whether the price is worthwhile or not. And some of us think it is worthwhile, and some of us think it isn't. And it depends on how much risk averse you are. And yeah, without taking risk, you'll never move towards the goals you have. And a secure Israel is a goal. And we need to do that, but this is why they oppose it. I think only very few in Israel are with the, but not that few, are with the first source of opposition, which is saying, these are Palestinian lands, so why do we do that? I don't think this is very common in Israel. Of course, we have 15 members of Knesset who are in the joint list who believe in that. And we also have some people in Meretz who believe in that as well. But beyond the Meretz and the joint list, I don't think you will find many people, because one of the things the Palestinians did in the recent years, especially with the Second Intifada and then in Gaza, is that whereas in 1993, like, let's say, close to 50% of the Jewish citizens of Israel were ready to believe that the Palestinians should have this territory. Today, I think only something like 5% of the Jewish citizens of Israel believe so. So this is the price the Palestinians paid for not playing by the book that was written for them by those willfully blind or ignorant people. And the situation has changed in Israel quite dramatically. So even though some of them are very vocal and they probably get a lot of support from the people who support this paradigm in the United States and Europe, the vast majority of Israelis think differently. And this is why in the Knesset, I believe there is a vast majority for those who support the application of Israeli law in the Jordan Valley and over the settlement.
Yossi, there is also a section of the right, the extreme, the far right in Israel, the settlers, the settler movement, injured in Samaria, who are also opposing this move. Could you explain to us why?
Yeah, because they are against the element in the plan that says that in the final status, there's going to be also a Palestinian state, and they are very worried about the Palestinian state. So they say, as we say in Hebrew, moichel toives. I give up on those good things that you want to give me because there's a price tag attached to it, and this is the establishment of the Palestinian state. What, in my mind, they don't understand is that according to this plan, a Palestinian state is going to be established only after the Palestinians change their narrative. As a matter of fact, for entering the negotiations, the Palestinians have to change much of their narrative. For example, the Palestinian narrative is based on the idea that the identity of the Palestinians is the struggle against Zionism. That's what the Palestinians, that's what made the Palestinians Palestinians. They struggle against Zionism. And because of that, those who struggle are heroes and should be rewarded. And because of that, the Palestinians pay salaries to terrorists, very huge salaries, much more than you would earn if you were an official of the Palestinian Authority. So the plan states very clearly, if you want to enter negotiations, you have to stop paying salaries to terrorists. And so I'm saying once the Palestinians stop paying salaries to terrorists, once the Palestinians accept that Israel is the nation state of the Jewish people with democratic regime, once the Palestinians are ready to accept that the Jews are not the descendants of apes and pigs, as they teach themselves. Once the Palestinians are ready to show Israel on their maps and improve their textbooks in a way that reflects a different narrative. Once all of that happens, we can have a Palestinian state. But let's wait for that to happen. And the nice thing about the plan also is that the plan is not illusionary. The plan says even after they do all of that, and it's going to take a long time before they do it, but even after they do all of that, the responsibility for security will remain in the hands of Israel until Israel feels secure enough in order to transfer the responsibility for security for the Palestinians. And this means that we have to wait until this new paradigm, new narrative is inculcated in the minds of the Palestinians, because this is not going to happen just because the leadership will say, okay, from now on, we are ready to have two states for two peoples. Nice. So this is a necessary condition, but it's not a sufficient condition. This new message has to be inculcated by the Palestinian people. This is going to take a long time. So it's, we have to understand that. And those like Lachiani and others who are against the implementation of the plan, and including the application of sovereignty over certain areas, including over their own communities, are so much afraid of this Palestinian state that they are ready to give up the application of the sovereignty.
Thank you. Yossi, there are those that say even legally, if you are right, let's say legally 100% right, they say morally, it's the wrong thing to do. Morally, it will be the death of the peace plan with the Palestinians, and it will be the death of the two-state solution. And then what is the alternative? And in some ways, what we are saying is the Palestinians are not coming to the table anyway. Certainly now they're not going to come to the table anymore. So it will be the death of a two-state solution and any peace plan with the Palestinians. What would you say to that?
I say this is the only chance for a two-state solution with the Palestinians. Two states for two people. That's what we are looking for. Because we have tried. If anybody could have proven to me that the old paradigm has produced the chance for a two-state solution, or two states for two peoples, I would say, great, let's do it. I was not against Oslo at the time. That's when I thought that there is a chance. But very soon after Oslo, I understood there's no chance. Basically, if anybody would have proven that there is a chance, of course. But we know that this old paradigm led nowhere, and not because of Israel. Israel said, yes, we are ready to discuss any of the proposals that were raised. It failed because of the Palestinians, because of Palestinian rejectionism, because of the Palestinian refusal to accept Israel as the nation state of the Jewish people. So that's, we are trying to defend a lost case. On the other hand, if we move in this direction, that is conditioned on Israel's readiness to accept the notion of two states for two peoples, that is without it we cannot apply the law and the sovereignty. That's because otherwise the Americans are not going to support it. It's, this is going to commit Israel to a two states for two people solution, and will give the Palestinians, once they realize that there is a price that they are paying for their rejectionist attitude, an understanding that, well, we are paying too much for something that we cannot achieve anyhow. So maybe we should do some soul searching and adopt a new attitude. And this is something that never happened to them. They were never in a position where they had to rethink about what they're doing. They had these kind of things, but only on a tactical level, or at best at operational level, but not on a strategic level. They did have to, for example, to give up the second intifada. They did have to give up the first intifada because we put a lot of pressure on them. Never because they want, because we put a lot of pressure. They did stop all the 3 rounds of operational activities against us from Gaza because we put a lot of pressure, not because they gained something, because we put a lot of pressure. But we never put a pressure in order to gain something on the peace process. Here's the first time that pressure is going to be put on the Palestinians in order to allow the peace process to move forward. So all of those who are worried about the peace process, they are not worried about the peace process. They are worried about their own personal commitment to the old paradigm. That's what they're worried about. And it's not about the peace process because they produced nothing. And they don't want to see their reputation being harmed. That's what they're worried about. Not about peace. And they don't care about the Palestinians. If this was happening between the Turks and the Cypriots in Cyprus, who would care about it? They don't care about the Palestinians. It's all about the Jews. And they have something to say about the Jews, and they want to be involved in that. And this is something they didn't invent, not invented here. So they must be against it. That's what we witness. And I think we should move forward and make the Palestinians think about the prices they have to pay. And maybe for the first time, there will be somebody in the Palestinian leadership, maybe not amongst the current leadership, maybe there are going to be new leaders, that would say, what are we doing? Situation is changing against us, and we stick to all kinds of archaic demands that are not going to be implemented ever. And instead of, we have to understand, there is a tension inside the Palestinian communities between 2 lines of thinking. And we have to help the line of thinking that is able to produce peace. One line of thinking is that the most important thing for the Palestinians is the struggle against Zionism. And for the struggle against Zionism, we are ready to pay in everything that relates to our quality of life. We are committed to the struggle, and this is the only thing that matters. And yes, we want to be happy and rich and knowledgeable and send our children to study in Harvard, but the struggle is the most important thing. And this is not only Hamas, of course, that leads this line of thinking, but also Fatah is of the same line of thinking. The differences between them is what kind of struggle is more efficient. Do we have to use rockets and explosives, or can it be sufficient to use only what they call popular resistance, namely ramming, car rammings, stones, Molotov cocktails, and so on, which is better digested by the West. This is the main debate over there, but both of them agree that the struggle is the most important thing. On the other hand, you have a lot of people in the Palestinian community who say, well, if we could get rid of the Zionists, it could have been a nice idea, but we cannot. Let's realize we cannot get rid of the Zionists. So paying forever the price of not having a good life for ourselves makes no sense. So while we remain committed to the struggle against Zionists, let's put the quality of life as the overriding consideration that dictates our way of living. And some of these people went to this meeting that the Americans arranged in Manama last year. And these are the people that from where a new leadership for the Palestinians can emerge. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. The Palestinians are given according to this plan 4 years in order to think it over. I don't expect Abu Mazen to accept it, because Abu Mazen is totally committed to the struggle. I wish he would have changed his mind, but I personally tried so many times to convince him to do that. He always refused. So I find it very remote that he would make such a change. But there are many other people inside the Palestinian communities that are ready to say, listen, this is not going to happen. We are not going to throw the Jews into the sea. It's a nice dream, but it's only a dream. It's not going to materialize. So let's focus on having better life. Now, this plan offers us a fortune. This plan offers us more than $25 billion. Let's take it. Let's make our life better. And we shall, if sometime the Zionists will decide to go to the sea, it will be great. But let's not spend our money on and our fortune on trying to push them to the sea. Look, Hania, the leader of Hamas, just to refer to that in an interview he had in Qatar a couple of days ago, he said the Americans presented us $15 billion and asked us to give up the struggle, and we shall never give up the struggle. It doesn't matter how much you pay us, we shall never give up the struggle. Okay. So Hania wants to struggle forever. What does he think? That eventually he's going to get back to Jaffa? What are the Palestinians supposed to do? They're supposed to suffer forever? It's because their leaders believe that they are one day going to go back to Jaffa. In the Balata refugee camp near Nablus, there's a big building called Markaz Jaffa, the center of Jaffa. And the Palestinians who live in this refugee camp are all the time prepared to go back to Jaffa. They go to the Markaz Jaffa, and they are trained to go back to Jaffa tomorrow morning if needed. And I spoke with the Palestinians. I was sent, a Palestinian official was sent to me to discuss some matter. And I said, listen, why won't we move towards real peace, and we shall make the life of the people of Balata better, because they live in a poor living conditions. He refused. He refused to make the living conditions of the people in Ramallah, in Balata better, because they have to be ready to move to Jaffa, back to Jaffa. This is crazy. This is crazy. So many people, even in Balata, in my mind, understand that if they want to have better life, maybe some change in their attitude is needed.
Okay. Yossi, tell us, do you think there's a danger that by making this move, we might weaken the leadership of the Palestinian Authority? We rely on some cooperation with them, security cooperation, administrative, civil cooperation. By weakening their administration, by doing this move, might lead to another intifada, or even worse, might even lead to war. What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it may weaken their leadership, because their leadership is committed to the old paradigm, and now that the new paradigms enter, they will be challenged to adapt a new policy towards the new paradigm. And the fact that there is a new paradigm tells to any Palestinian that the old paradigm is dead. And it's going to be very painful for this leadership. Of course, this can all change if there is a new attitude coming from the United States in November. So it's, but let's just play for the sake of the thinking about it, that Trump wins. Okay, that doesn't look very plausible, but let's say that this is going to happen. Yes, this is the idea, that the Palestinian leadership will have to rethink about it. And no, I'm not going to shed tears if a new leadership that is more ready to adopt a new paradigm is going to be replacing the old one. That's, you know how many times I heard from Palestinian interlocutors, but you have to remember, there is nobody better than Abu Mazen. And I said, yes, I don't think that there is any better from Abu Mazen, but he too is totally committed to the destruction of Israel, and refuses to accept Israel as a nation state of the Jewish people, refuses to accept Israel for what it is, for a reason. It's not a matter of naming names. It's a very critical matter. He refuses to accept that there is a Jewish people. I read almost everything that Abu Mazen has ever said and wrote. And Abu Mazen has a book called Zionism from Beginning to End, in which he explains how Zionism should be fought until it disappears. That's what Abu Mazen believes. You know, every time he meets the Palestinian leadership, he gives them lectures about the history and how the British invented the Zionism and so on and so forth. And he refuses to accept that there is a Jewish people. He denies the existence of a Jewish people. He denies the existence of Jewish history in the land of Israel. That's Abu Mazen.
But what if Abu Mazen is replaced by a worse leader, by Hamas, because of the weakness?
Could be. That would be a very poor thing for the Palestinians. We know how to handle Hamas as well. We handle them. But I think that in the Judea and Samaria area, it's going to be a little bit difficult, because we are in a better control than the one we had in Gaza when this happened. But I cannot rule it out. It's a possibility. And I hope this is not going to be the direction, and to the extent that we can interfere, we should try and help those people in the Palestinian community that are looking for better coordination. Look, so many Palestinians are working in Israel. So many people amongst the Palestinians rely on the income of the Palestinians that are working in Israel. So many Palestinians are not stupid. Most of the Palestinians are not stupid, are not romantic to the extent that they can't see what's happening. And, that's why many Palestinians say, we would rather live under Israeli control. We don't want to live under Palestinian control. We want to live under Israeli control. So we don't want to control the Palestinians. We don't rule them. We don't want to rule them. But there are enough Palestinians who understand that for their own best, they have to have a different approach. If it's going to come from Abu Mazen, wonderful. That's exactly what we want. But if Abu Mazen insists, and anyhow he's very old, but if Abu Mazen insists on his commitment to the struggle, because this is what he wants his legacy to be. So we have to think about alternatives. One of the alternatives is Hamas. It's a bad alternative. Nobody wants that. But there are other alternatives as well. Even amongst the leadership of Fatah, there are people who think differently. You know what? Let me give you a story. Okay, I have one of my Palestinian leaders' friends. We were sitting one day in Jerusalem, and I said to him, "Listen, how come you are a knowledgeable person? How come you insist that there was no Jewish temple on Temple Mount?" you know that you cannot tell history, you cannot write history without admitting that there was a Jewish temple on Temple Mount. So he said to me, let me tell you a story, Cooper. One day I went to Arafat, and we were in Four Eyes. And I said to Arafat, listen, Abu Ammar, between us, between the two of us, we know there was a Jewish temple, huh? Why do we insist on saying that whenever we say the Jewish temple, we have to say the alleged Jewish temple? Well, we know there was a Jewish temple. Let's say that there was a Jewish temple and move on. So Arafat told him, listen, my friend, what is your monthly allowance? So my friend told him, okay, I understand. No Jewish temple. So it's not that the Palestinians, they do know that there was a Jewish temple, but they are not allowed to say it. So, and amongst their leaders, there are people who know that there was a Jewish temple. That there is a sound Israeli and Jewish demand for this piece of land. They know it. So we have to create a situation where these people will be able to say what they know. Because right now, if anybody would say something like that in the, there was this professor from Al-Quds University, Muhammad Dajani, who took his pupils, a group of pupils to Auschwitz. He didn't say that the Jews suffered from the conflict, which is not allowed. He just said the Jews also suffered. Not from the conflict, but the Jews also suffered. When he came back to Jerusalem, his car was put ablaze, and he had to move to the United States to stay alive. That is the situation today. But there are many Dajanis, there are many other people who, I cannot say their name loudly because God knows what is going to happen to them tomorrow. But there are many people inside the Palestinian community that are aware of the realities. We have to give them enough courage to stand out and speak out. That's what may happen if we move on with this plan. We may have a partner. Today, we don't have a partner.
So Yossi, let's talk a little bit more factually what will actually happen. Let's say the sovereignty is taken over, Israel takes sovereignty over this area. On the ground, what changes? What changes for those Jews living in the area, and what changes for the Palestinians living in the area? What is the actual change?
Oh, on the ground, very little is going to change, because as everybody says, we are already in control of this territory. But it's going to change a little bit for the people, the Israelis living there, because the law that is going to be applied in the places where they live, the law over the territory, is going to be the Israeli law, and which will mean that they will be able to build under the Israeli law and not under mandatory law and the Jordanian law that is implemented by the military regime. So this is going to be easier for them to get permits to build and so on and so forth. Moreover, we may, I don't know, it depends on the government, but we may start building more cities over there and better transportation routes and things like that is going to help the people that are living there. Security-wise, what's going to happen with the change in the security realm is going to be in the perception, not in the situation on the ground. The situation on the ground is going to remain the same. But the perception is going to change because everybody will understand we're here to stay. And because as long as this is open for negotiations, it's open for negotiations. So everybody believes eventually those Jews will go back to 67 lines, which will enable us to keep on the pressure over them to get rid of them. It's the perception revolution here is going to be tremendous, because it's going to tell the Palestinians and the Jordanians and everybody else, the Jews are here to stay. The Jewish people are here to stay. And that's something that is has not yet drizzled into their minds. They still dream of the day that, some of them, not all of them, some of them are still dreaming of the day that the Jews will go back to where they came from. I think this is very, very important change for these people, because it will force them to think differently. And the lines are not that important, because the fact that somebody will draw a line, I don't think it's going to change anything for the military. The military will continue to move in the same places where it moved before. There's going to be, of course, a certain period of time, nobody knows how long, of heightened tensions and terror attacks and demonstrations and these kind of things. But eventually they will die down, as they always do. And then people will have to say to themselves, okay, now we are in a new reality. Where do we go from here? And this is the change, but it's conceptual and perception change, and not that much underground, with the exception of the situation of the settlers and some activities of planning and zoning that can be done differently in these areas once the law is applied.
Very good. Let's look a little bit into the future. Netanyahu will assumedly step down at some point. Benny Gantz will step into the position. Let's say this hasn't happened until then yet. Will Benny Gantz continue? Let's say the sovereignty, this annexation, the sovereignty has not happened yet. And Benny Gantz takes over as prime minister. Will this continue? Will he continue with the sovereignty plan? Or will things change? I assume Trump still has to be in position.
Yeah.
But let's say he is re-elected, but this drags on. Will this continue?
It's very difficult to say. According to agreement, yes, but between Gantz and Netanyahu, yes, but I doubt it, because you don't see any enthusiasm on behalf of Gantz to follow this line. He's not against it. He's never spoken against it. But he puts all kinds of further obstacles and conditions that are not there by Netanyahu. So I doubt if Gantz will do it, but I don't rule it out. For the time being, he was not needed. He was not in a situation where he had to reflect on such a situation. Okay, so he never said anything about it. But he was in the White House when Trump called him and Netanyahu to present to them the plan, and he was positive about it. And before the elections, he was positive about the idea that Israel should be the sovereign power in the Jordan Valley. So it's not something that is against his concept. He would like very much to see everything going smoothly, and it seems that he likes to have free lunch. As I said before, it's very difficult to get a free lunch. You have to take risks in order to eat and to pay something. And he wants to believe that he can get something without a price. I don't think this is possible, but he has not faced this reality yet.
Very good. Okay. Yossi, it's been fascinating. It's been interesting hearing from you. The difficulty with us outside of Israel, understanding the implications, you can imagine, all we see is anti-annexation moves, both from government, both from Europe, both from a lot of people, a lot of Jewish groups as well, see this as a political move against peace. You have laid out very clearly why Israel has the need to do this. There are many who are very uncomfortable with this move, mostly for moral reasons as well. Some feel legally that there is a position as well. I would like to think that the Israeli government is considering everything. When it does this move, it considers as well the lives of the Jewish people around the world. Although, first and foremost, the most important thing is the safety of Israeli citizens in Israel. And the Israeli government must make any decision, first and foremost, based on that. The first objective of an Israeli government is to defend its citizens. And that's what it needs to do. Whether it's immediately or whether it's for the future, it has to do that. But us...
This is more for the future than for immediately.
Exactly, exactly. But as Jews living outside, all the Jews around the world feel they have a stake in Israel. Albeit they don't live in Israel, don't pay taxes, don't vote. Every Jew feels they have a stake in Israel. So we can understand why when Jews feel that it affects them outside of Israel, we can understand that. But it cannot be the consideration. Israeli government must defend its own people first. We must consider that. I'd like to thank you for your time. And I'd like to thank you for your analysis. We've had many, many questions. We've only managed to get through a few of them. You've been fantastic. We thank you for doing this for us. And maybe, please God, in the future, we will see you in person, where you can come over freely without having quarantine and see us. So I'd also like to thank all of our viewers, all those that participated today. It's important for us to understand all sides of this discussion. Nothing in Israel is simple, and nothing in Israel is ever agreed upon by everyone. But we need to understand why. And so thank you for tuning in today to this fascinating webinar, simply to understand another point of view. All of those, please stay in contact with the Zionist Federation. We have plenty more webinars to come, and stay connected. I want to thank you all. Most importantly, love Israel, be connected, have your say, have your opinion, and that's the most important thing. I've been Paul Charney, Chairman of the Zionist Federation. Yossi Kuperwasser has been...
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody.
And you...
Trying to read your questions, and if I'll be able to reflect on some of them, I'll send you a written response, okay?
Fantastic. That's very kind. Thank you so much. Go well, stay safe, and hope to see you all in the future. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Salam alaikum.